All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're going deep on the Porsche Turbo.
Ooh, a good one.
You guys sent in a ton of stuff for this one, celebrating 50 years of the Turbo.
Yeah, we've got articles, historical deep dives, even some stuff on what these cars are going for these days.
It's amazing how it's more than just like a fast engine, right? It's an icon.
Definitely, the turbo is like, I don't know, almost a symbol.
Totally. So first off, like, where'd this whole turbo thing even start? You'd think Porsche invented it, but...
Uh-huh. No, not quite.
Right.
Turbochargers themselves, I mean, they go way back, like early 1900s.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and get this, American car companies were using them in the 60s already, like Oldsmobile, Chevy.
No kidding. So if they were already around, what got Porsche so interested?
Well, one story is that BMW kind of nudged them in that direction.
Oh, really? How so?
It was a concept car back at the '72 Olympics, the E25 Turbo. It was a gull-wing design, kind of previewed the BMW M1 supercar later on.
I've seen pictures of that. So sleek.
Yeah, and Porsche saw that, and it got them thinking about turbos on the road, not just the track.
So a bit of keeping up with the Joneses then.
Maybe a little. But to be fair, Porsche was already deep into turbo tech. They just hadn't put it in a road car yet.
Got all that racing heritage.
Exactly. Early 70s, their 91750 was dominating Can-Am racing. And they were figuring out all this stuff like the wastegate.
Okay, hold up. For us non-race car drivers, what's a wastegate?
Good point. So basically, it's like a pressure relief valve for the turbo.
Okay,
Without it, all that boost could get out of control.
makes sense.
So the wastegate keeps the power smooth and makes the engine last longer. Super important for endurance races.
Smart. So they've got the know-how, they see the potential, but when does the 911 Turbo actually show up?
Not right away. There were a few hints first.
Oh, like what?
In '73, they showed this concept car, the 911 RSR Turbo, at the Frankfurt Motor Show.
Getting people excited.
Yeah, then in '74, they built a one-off turbo just for Ferry Porsche's sister.
Now that's a cool gift. So at this point, everyone's got to be waiting for the real deal.
Totally. And then, boom, 1974, Paris Motor Show. It arrives, the Porsche 911 930 Turbo, the one that became known as.
Widowmaker, yeah.
That's the one.
That name is legendary, but kind of scary too.
It was something else. So picture it, Paris Motor Show, this wide-bodied 911 comes out.
I'm trying to imagine it.
And it's got this huge whale tail spoiler, those wide rear tires, just the look, you know? And then the specs, 3.0-liter flat six, single KKK turbocharger.
Single. I thought they were all twin turbo.
Nope, not this early one. It was pushing out 260 horsepower, fastest production car in the world.
It must have been insane back then.
Oh, totally. But yeah, that nickname, Widowmaker.
What made it so
It
dangerous?
was the mid-'70s, right? No traction control, no stability management, nothing like that.
Oh, right.
So you had all this power, but it was a handful, especially if you weren't a really skilled driver.
So not just point and shoot.
No way. The 930, you had to know what you were doing. It had turbo lag, so the power wasn't smooth. You hit the gas, and then whoosh, all this power hits the rear wheels.
Yeah, that rear engine layout probably didn't help.
Nope. Weight distribution all messed up. Easy to get oversteer, especially if you weren't expecting it.
I've heard some people say that Porsche basically took a regular 911, bolted on a turbo, and said good luck.
Well, there is some truth to that. I mean, it was a different time. They were pushing the limits.
Yeah, but I thought I read somewhere that it was built for racing.
Right. It was a homologation special.
Homologation.
Yeah, basically to race in certain series, you got to build a certain number of street legal versions of your race car.
Okay.
So for the 930, Porsche needed 400 of them.
So racing was the priority, not necessarily making it a perfect road car.
Yeah, they were focused on winning on the track. To be fair to them, they did keep refining the 930 over the years.
Right, they made it better.
They improved the engine, suspension, brakes, aerodynamics, the whole thing.
So it got a bit less widow-making.
Haha. You could say that, but that initial rawness, that's part of why it's so legendary now.
Makes sense. So it's this exciting but dangerous car. What did people think of it back then?
Oh, it was a hit. Huge success. The performance, the styling, it was exclusive.
And everyone knew it was a beast.
Exactly. That Widowmaker name, it just added to the mystique, like, you know it's a handful, but you got to try it.
That bad boy image, right?
Totally. And even though it was tough to drive, it was rewarding too if you could handle it. It was like nothing else on the road, like taming a wild animal.
So the 930 Turbo is off to a great start, but there's more to the story, right?
Oh yeah, we're just getting started. The 930, it goes through some changes, and that turbo name, it becomes more than just a model. It becomes like a brand within Porsche.
Now, that's interesting, but we'll have to hear about that in part 2.
So we left off with the 930 turbo making waves, but, it had its quirks.
That whole Widowmaker thing probably got Porsche thinking about, making things a little friendlier.
Haha. Yeah, you could say that. By 1978, they'd made some changes, trying to smooth things out a bit.
Like what?
Well, they made the engine bigger, 3.3 liters.
More power?
Yep, more power and torque. But the big one? They added an intercooler.
Okay, now there's another one of those terms, intercooler. What's that all about?
So think about it this way. When you compress air, it gets hot.
Okay.
The turbocharger, that's what it does, compresses air to cram more of it into the engine. That's how you get that boost.
Right.
But hot air, it's not as dense, so it's not as efficient.
Interesting.
The intercooler, it cools that compressed air down before it goes into the engine. Denser air, more power.
Gotcha. So it's not just about raw power, it's about using it better.
Exactly. Smoother power delivery, more efficient. And they changed the look a bit, too, that whale tail spoiler.
Oh, yeah, that's so iconic.
They replaced it with the T-tray spoiler. Still a big wing, just a different design.
I gotta say, I love that about Porsche. They're always tinkering, always improving, both how the cars perform and how they look.
They're definitely not afraid to experiment. But it wasn't all smooth sailing for the 930.
What do you mean?
In 1980, they had to stop selling it in the U.S. and Japan for a while.
Really? Why?
Emissions regulations, it couldn't pass the tests.
Wow, so what did they do?
Well, it's kind of funny. At that time, Porsche actually thought their 928 model, the front engine one, they thought it was going to replace the 911.
Really? That's wild. Imagine if they actually done that.
I know, right? Shows you how much people love the 911, especially that turbo.
So they put the 911 on hold and focused on the 928.
Yeah, for a bit. But even with all that uncertainty, they kept working on the 930. In 81, they offered this new option, the Flakbau.
Hold on, flak bow, what's that?
It's German for flat nose, the slant nose.
Oh, right, with those pop-up headlights.
Yeah.
That is one cool-looking car.
It was inspired by their 935 race car, super distinctive, and these were hand-built, crazy expensive, only made about 948 of them.
I bet those are worth a fortune now.
Yeah, serious collector's items. And then a couple of years later, 1983, they rolled out another performance upgrade, even more extreme, the Werksleistungssteigerung.
Wow, try saying that 3 times fast.
Aha, yeah, it's a mouthful. But basically, it was a factory performance package, bumped the power up to 330 horsepower, quad pipe exhaust, the whole 9 yards.
This thing was a beast. So by this point, the 930 Turbo, it's really becoming the legend we know, both for its performance ADD, just how cool it is.
For sure, but then something pretty big happens.
What's that?
The 930 Turbo finally came back to the U.S. in 1986.
They figured out the emissions thing.
Yep, got it all sorted out. And not only that, they introduced Targa and Cabriolet versions of the Turbo.
No way. So you could finally have that open-air turbo experience.
Exactly, big changes. And then in 1989, the end of an era, they stopped making the 930 Turbo.
The end of the line.
Yeah, but they sent it off in style. The last model year, they finally put in that 5-speed Getrag G50 transmission that everyone had been asking for.
So they gave the people what they wanted. Nice work.
They did. But the big question is, what about the turbo name itself? Did it die with the 930?
That's a good question. I mean, the car was gone, but the legend,
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. The turbo badge. It didn't go away. It became a permanent fixture on every new generation of the 911.
So not just a special model anymore, like the top-of-the-line 911.
Right. It became the performance benchmark, the 911 Turbo.
Makes sense, but then it went even further, didn't it? Like beyond just the 911.
It did. And that's where things get a little controversial, I guess you could say.
How so?
The Turbo started showing up on other Porsche models. First it was the 924 Turbo, then the 944 Turbo.
Okay, yeah, still sports cars.
Right. But then came the Cayenne SUV.
Ah, yes, the Cayenne. I remember when that came out, some people were not happy.
Yeah, it was a big change for Porsche, an SUV. It had a turbocharged V8, lots of power, but it wasn't a sports car.
Right, but it was a huge success for them.
It was, commercially, and it performed really well. But it started this trend, the turbo name spreading to other models. You had the Panamera Turbo, the Macan Turbo.
And then the one that really got people talking, the Taycan Turbo.
Yeah, an electric car with a turbo badge. Some people thought it was sacrilege.
How can an electric car even be a turbo? There's no turbocharger.
That's what a lot of people said. But Porsche's logic, it makes sense in a way. They're saying the turbo isn't just about the tech anymore. It's about the top performance level for that model, no matter what kind of engine it has.
So gas, hybrid, electric. If it's the fastest, it's a turbo.
That's the idea. And I get it. It keeps things consistent across the lineup, even as they're changing with the times.
Smart marketing, for sure. So the Turbo has come a long way from that wild 930 to a whole performance sub-brand for Porsche.
A whole philosophy, almost. But I think it's worth remembering where it all started, that 930 Turbo, the Widowmaker.
What's its legacy today?
Well, for starters, it's a highly desirable collector car.
I bet those things are going for crazy money these days.
The market for them, it goes up and down, can be unpredictable, but there's no doubt people want them.
What do you think it is about that car that still captures people's imaginations? Why is it so special?
It's a few things, I think. It's historically significant, right? It was a groundbreaking car, pushed the limits of what was possible back then. It demanded respect. It challenged drivers.
Not just a car, an experience.
Exactly. You had to be on your game to drive it. And I think that rawness, that's part of the appeal. In today's world where everything's computerized and full of safety features, the 930 feels pure, analog. You're really connected to the machine.
It's like a time capsule, back to when driving was more, I don't know, visceral.
And the styling, you can't deny it. It just looks cool. Those wide fenders, the big spoilers, the classic 911 shape. It's aged really well.
It still looks modern even today.
And it was exclusive. They didn't make a ton of them, so that makes them even more desirable to collectors.
So it's got history, presence, and it's just plain cool. No wonder people still love it.
Yeah.
But its impact goes beyond just being a collector's item, right?
Right. It set the stage for every high-performance turbo that came after it. All the 911 turbos, the Cayenne Turbo, Panamera Turbo, even the Taycan Turbo.
So the 930, it's like the grandfather of the whole turbo brand at Porsche.
Exactly. It set the standard, the expectations for what a Porsche Turbo should be. It's what makes the whole story so interesting, this mix of innovation, pushing boundaries, creating cars that are more than just fast, they're memorable.
So we've seen how Turbo went from one model to a whole performance level across the whole Porsche range.
It's pretty amazing, but there's one more thing I think we need to talk about. Something that makes the Porsche Turbo more than just a car. It's like an attitude, a way of thinking.
Okay, now you've got me curious, but I guess we'll have to wait for part 3 for that. All right, last part of our Turbo deep dive.
Yeah.
You were saying there's more to the Turbo than just, like, how fast it goes.
Yeah, it's almost like a way of life, a turbo mindset, you know?
Okay, I'm not sure I follow.
Think about what it stands for. Pushing limits, always improving, exceeding expectations.
It's like being the best you can be.
Exactly, but with this precision, this cutting-edge tech, always striving for excellence.
It's more than just speed then. It's the dedication behind it.
Right, and that speaks to people, even if they're not car-crazy turbo. It means high performance, quality, innovation.
I can see that in your work, your personal life, even just how you approach things, that turbo idea could really push you.
Totally. It's like set high standards, push yourself, don't settle for, good enough.
This reminds me, one of the articles you sent, it said that the old 930 Turbo, the Widowmaker, with all its flaws, it might have been the most turbo of them all.
That's an interesting take. How so?
Well, they said that car, it really made you work for it. You had to be on top of your game to handle it.
Oh, yeah. You couldn't just jump in and floor it. You had to respect it.
Learn how to drive it properly.
Yeah.
Really be in control.
And when you got it right, man, that car was something else.
So the 930, it forced you to have that turbo mindset, to really push yourself.
I think there's something to that. It was from a time when driving was more raw, more about the connection between the driver and the car.
Not so much computer intervention, more about skill.
Exactly. And that's maybe what's missing from some of the newer cars. They're so refined, so safe, you lose a bit of that edge.
So what's the lesson here? As cars get more high-tech, are we losing that human element?
Maybe. It's something to think about. The Porsche Turbo, it reminds us that true performance, it's not just about specs and gadgets. It's about passion, dedication, pushing the limits.
And that's something we can all take inspiration from, whether we're driving a Porsche or, just living our lives.
So as we wrap this up, I want you to think about what really stood out to you about the Porsche Turbo.
Yeah, what got you excited? Was it those early days of turbocharging, the 91710 tearing up the racetrack? Or maybe the 930, that wild child, the Widowmaker?
Or how about the Turbo name itself, how it went from one model to this whole performance idea, even on electric cars now?
Whatever it is, there's a whole world of Porsche Turbo out there. Go explore it.
Dive in, learn more, and maybe, just maybe, find a little bit of that turbo mindset for yourself.
Until next time, keep pushing the limits, everyone, and thanks for listening.